Want to give a little bit of a second here for some folks to get logged in. But we want to thank everyone for attending today, and we're really excited to be bringing this topic to you guys with some experts here in the field. We're going to talk about the power of interim talent, enhancing finance teams with flexibility and expertise. Um, my name is Matt Shore, and I'm the CEO of StevenDouglas. We are a boutique executive search and interim resources firm. It's been around for 40 plus years. We actually happen to be top 25 Hunt Scanlon list, a top 25 member on their list, but we also happen to be one of the early movers in the interim resources space. You see a lot of executive search firms now getting into that business. We've actually been in the business for 18 years. When I joined the company, I launched that practice, and it's been a huge part of our long-term success and our growth. Today, very fortunate to have one of my colleagues here and two of our longtime clients that have used both our search and interim resources practices. They're going to share their wisdom and how they've utilized these types of services over the years, and kind of their vision for how you might be able to leverage these service offerings. So if we can go ahead and introduce the panel here. Haresh, maybe just give a quick introduction to your background.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Matt, and great to be here, everyone. Haresh Shah. Currently, I am the CFO at Club Car. We make golf cars, consumer, and utility vehicles. So if you play golf, you've seen our product. 30 years of experience in finance, last 7 or 8 as a CFO. So with CFO of public companies, as well as my last 2 private equity backed. So a lot of experience, and then spent about 6, 7 years as an expat, also living in Asia, and a 3-month stint in Europe. So a lot of experience, a lot of changes over the years. I can't believe I said 30 years. So it's been a lot we've seen throughout this time.
Excellent, thank you. And I'm still waiting for you guys to come out with a golf cart that'll help me get better at golf, but I'm going to stay tuned on that one. I don't know when that's coming, but I am buying it when it comes out. Jeff, you want to jump in?
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jeff Lawrence. I am currently the Chief Financial Officer at National Spine and Pain Centers, where I've been for the last about 15 months. We are a minimally invasive pain management healthcare company. We have about 80 clinics and 23 surgery centers in about 8 states. I am not only a client of StevenDouglas, but Matt actually placed me in a job about 17 years ago, and I've been, a loyal fan and customer ever since, and have used them across multiple companies. I've been in a C-suite position for the last about 13 years, and so I'm happy to be here to support StevenDouglas and provide whatever insight I can.
Thank you, Jeff. Appreciate it. Craig?
Yeah, thanks, Matt. So Craig Lewis, currently the leader of the Interim Resources Division for StevenDouglas. We cover most of the major markets in the Southeast, Northeast, Midwest, and Southwest U.S. I live in the greater Atlanta area and have been supporting clients and people in the interim space for the past 20 years. Including leading a team of about 200 people in a $600 million business unit of a publicly traded company. Prior to that, I spent 18 years as a supply chain leader with global Fortune 1000 companies and lived pretty much all over the geographies that I currently support. And look forward to the conversation today. And I know you'll appreciate hearing from both Haresh and Jeff about their experiences with interim resources. So back to you, Matt.
Excellent. Thank you, guys. So the way it's going to work is we're going to spend 45 minutes doing a little Q&A here, and then we're going to open it up to the audience. Please use the chat feature to ask any questions that you'd like to ask of the panel. You could ask the panel in general, or you can ask somebody very specifically if there's something you'd like to ask them. Send that through the chat. I'm going to start with Haresh. According to the Future of Jobs report, 23% of jobs are expected to change in the next 5 years. As a CFO, how do you see finance organizations changing to meet the needs of organizations? And how will you find talent that you need for those changes?
Yeah. Thanks, Matt. I think there's no question with the technology, with what's happening, that there are going to be changes. You know, the foundation, I think, for finance has always been the data piece of it, right? We're data driven. We focus on the numbers, we focus on the facts, not only from a reporting, but really the fun part is driving the business and the value add, pushing that forward. I think where we'll really see the change and where we'll need to develop our team members is how do we adapt and leverage that technology, right? We talk about automation, AI, and my concern is not automation taking away finance jobs. My hope and benefit for us is that we leverage that to take out the non-value add work, the reporting, the gathering of the information, and even helping us to point areas that we should look at, right? It'll still need the human touch. It'll still need that skill set, that experience on what are the drivers and the levers of the business. How do we continue to improve that? So it's really going to be taking advantage of that technology. I think the way to do it is really, well, you know, my son's in college. He's learning. He's gonna do finance major, and he's gonna have a degree or a certificate in AI and data analytics. So I think those things are being taught throughout the university systems. So we'll have a talent pool coming out with that. But it's then making sure we educate the rest of our teams. How do we leverage it? I'm a big proponent of, with the technology that's out there now, there are quick wins that we can do. You know, system implementations are very large, challenging, time consuming, but with the bots and the automation tools out there, there are a lot of quick wins that we can do. And we've got a couple leaders on our team that have really owned that. And we're using them as champions in our organization to drive that change and then educate others within our team.
Excellent. Thank you. Jeff, anything you want to add there?
No, look, I agree 100% with Haresh. I think between certainly currently with the trend in our business is for the transactional, because again, we're a healthcare company. We're processing in terms of billing and collecting, you know, tens of thousands of transactions a month. And, you know, what we've done previously is offshore a lot of that. You know, we've got teams in India that are doing the transactional work. And I think to Haresh's point, that'll transition over time to more technology based, where we're capturing a lot of that information and doing the kind of the what of accounting, you know, the capturing the information. And it's really the why that you need to figure out, you know, where you can add value and where you're driving improvements in the business. And it's identifying those people and you know, fostering that talent where it's going to be the challenge. And I think you know, we're relying on the people that are coming out of schools and coming out of you know, opportunities of other organizations, that they can apply what they've learned in non-healthcare settings into the healthcare field in terms of, you know, data analytics and looking at things that in that way, because, you know, healthcare tends to be lagging a little bit when it comes to adopting technology from a finance standpoint. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity to kind of take from others what they've done in the technology space and apply it into healthcare.
Great, great. So I'm going to stay with Jeff here. So COVID had a major impact on the labor market, from the great resignation to the great reshuffling, and now we have the big stay. As you navigated through these pivots, how did you leverage interim resources to ensure you had the skill sets and bandwidth on your team to get your job done?
It's a good question, man. Thanks. I would say certainly, you know, again, when it comes to healthcare, COVID it was very disruptive. Obviously, you had people that were considered, you know, critical and had to be on the front line and in the clinics. You know, my experience, although I've only been with National Spine and Pain less than 2 years, I've been in healthcare since 2011. you know, obviously the people that were in the back office, the finance, the IT, HR, legal, compliance, all of those people were at home. And, you know, it was a big shift and it was a sudden shift, and it it forced people to you know, adapt. And that's when we started to utilize interim resources more, because we were able to feel, you know, we were able to identify gaps that, you know, became exacerbated when you weren't all in the same building, and you were able to fill those gaps with interim resources until you had the time to figure out, all right, is it necessary to, you know, find a person and bring them in, or can we get by with interim resources, or, you know, is it something that is, you know, temporary where we can figure it out and then move on. So I think temporary resources definitely helped with not only, you know, filling those gaps that were identified, but then teaching those skills to the people that we already had in our organization, and, you know, elevating the amount of work and the quality of work, I should say, that they were doing. And so some of those gaps kind of naturally went away because we were, you know, improving upon our resources, our people, through the use of interim resources.
Excellent, great. Haresh, anything to add there?
Maybe just one point. I think right after COVID, the challenge was, you know, guys old school like myself and Jeff, we're used to being in an office, right? And moving to a virtual environment was personally really challenging for me, right? And I struggled as a leader how to maintain the same work quality. You know, a big part of both of our jobs is walking around, seeing team members, helping solve problems, right? So how do we do that? How is our team going to adapt to this environment? So I think the flexibility of some of the folks that we work with, especially on the interim side, this is what they do, right? They get pulled into a project, they bring a skill set. They may not necessarily, even pre-COVID, have always been on site because they were a resource quickly brought on to help support that. So I think that was some learning and sharing that helped stabilize the team in really an unknown period for us.
Excellent, thank you. All right, question for Craig here. What trends have you seen in the interim market, and how will it affect the overall job market going forward?
Yeah, great question. And as I shared in my intro, I've been doing this for about 20 years and seen a lot of different things during that time. But we just talked about COVID, and clearly that accelerated a lot of change. And I think what I've seen specifically in our space, in the interim space, is that the traditional employment model, which is still a big part of how people go to work, but it's a little bit less attractive to a lot of the workers out there today. They're looking for flexibility. They're looking for variety. They want meaningful work that aligns with their values. And they want to keep growing their skills and obviously make an impact in whatever situation they're in. Job security is important too, but they want to balance it with all those other factors that I just mentioned. So, you know, on the interim side, it really offers an opportunity for people to see different work environments, see different industries. To some of the points Jeff and Haresh made, bringing people in, they're able to cross-pollinate things that they've seen in other places and bring that value to the place that they're working, and they can kind of do all that and have one employer of record. So for our people, the StevenDouglas people, they work for us, they have benefits through us, their paycheck comes from us, but yet they get all of these different experiences that they get to use as part of their career development. On the employer side, and you heard Jeff and Haresh both kind of allude to this. It provides the flexibility and opportunity to bring in critical skills for points in time. You think about the last 3 years post-COVID, specifically in 2022, employers were ramping up. The economy was booming, and then it kind of softened, and there were layoffs. Employees went through all of that. From a company reputation standpoint, hurts morale, hurts reputation and bottom line. So I think the interim model can help provide an attractive alternative to a lot of that. And I think we'll continue to see usage of the interim model increase over the next 5 years for both those reasons on the kind of employer and employee side.
Excellent, thank you. So Haresh, can you share an example where interim talent helped you navigate a critical business challenge?
Yeah, I think let me share a couple examples. One maybe from a business perspective, and then one from a more tactical finance team. But we during the kind of great resignation, as you referenced earlier, post COVID, we lost a key member of our financial planning and analysis team, right? Our FP&A team, a key business partner to the operations team, and relevant not only, and again, pulling the data, the reporting, the analytics, but helping to drive where we should go. The resource left, unfortunately, at that time, we're a small team, we run lean. We needed somebody to step in while we conducted a search. It's being a critical position. We wanted to make sure we didn't rush into that. So we were able to work with the team here, find a resource that we brought in, hit the ground running really day one, right? They've been there, they've done that, they have the skill sets. So really just come in, know what it is. Of course, there's a learning curve that they'll have to get up to speed in terms of the systems and the folks, but they have the skill set, they have the foundation. They were able to come in and with the support of their supervisor or director of FP&A, really were able to minimal impact to the business, continue the support that we need to do. And then once the position was filled, ensure that smooth transition over to the new person. And then one maybe a little bit more tactical on finance, we were a spinoff from a much larger corporation a couple of years ago. So we had to do a stand up. And as you stand up a company, there's lots of little things that just have to come through, whether it's compliance, tax filings, and numerous things that we're now responsible for versus a corporate headquarters. So we had fallen behind on some filings. We brought in a person. Again, it was somebody who can understand the problem, know who to reach, make the right phone calls, and then do the actual work, right? So it was a little bit of both, not just a detail-oriented person, but somebody who can go, hey, where do I need to go? How can I go solve this? So we brought somebody in. We're able to get caught up, able to work internally with our teams. How do I get the data? What's missing? How can I fill this requirement? And then most importantly, again, when we're done, set up a process that's repeatable so that we meet our deadlines and our commitments going forward.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. Great examples. And Jeff, want to jump in here?
Sure, I'd love to. This is a very timely question for me. National Spine and Pain was a private equity-backed company that in 2023 had a change in ownership when the lending group took over the company from private equity. So it's a bit of a turnaround situation. The lenders brought in a whole new board. That board brought me in as CFO. And prior to that, a large consulting firm that specializes in workout type consulting work. They had been brought in by the private equity group to look at liquidity, and soon thereafter, they were installed as interim CEO and CFO, and shortly after that, pretty much had installed many of their people in positions that had people left, right? The company was in flux. There was a lot of insecurity in terms of people about their job security. And so they lost their controller, their accounts payable manager, their FP&A director. So this consulting firm just started plugging those holes with their own people. So when I joined, I looked at our finance department, and we were spending in excess of $1 million a month in fees for these consultants. So just from an economic standpoint, it was nonsensical. So I picked up the phone and called one of Craig's people and said, all right, I need help, right? I need to transition as quickly as possible the accounts payable manager that's making $300,000 a year, or that we're paying $300,000 a year in fees to. I need to transition, the controller that's making over $1 million a year in fees. And within days, I had a stack of resumes on my desk where I could, find good interim resources that could step in quickly, transition these people out, and within 3 months, I had shaved off 70% of the fees that we were paying to this consulting firm, and replaced it with interim resources, which look, they were still more expensive than bringing someone on as a full-time employee, but I didn't have the luxury of waiting to go out and hire the right person and conduct several interviews and have them come in and meet and take that process to do that. So what I did is I filled it with interim resources, propped up those departments, made sure they were operating more effectively than they were before. And then I've had the luxury of more time now to start picking and choosing where I'm going to replace those interim resources with, full-time employees. So it's
Excellent. Thank you. Yeah, it was a great partnership on that. And I mean, the savings were just astronomical,
Yeah,
right? And
absolutely.
with the same quality of individuals sitting in those seats, in some cases doing a better job than the people that were being billed out at 3.5 times what they're being billed out at.
Right.
And it's just amazing that you hear these stories all over the country with these high these consulting firms are coming with these incredibly high fees, right? So and Jeff, I'm going to kind of come back, and I know there'll be some overlap in these questions, but I'll pose this one to you, and then I'll hopefully get some comments from Haresh as well. And you mentioned some of those benefits. So what do you see as the key benefits of using interim talent versus traditional full-time hires, and how do you measure those benefits?
Well, so I think, and this has been brought up both by Craig and Haresh. So, you're getting with interim talent, you're getting some experience that you may not necessarily get. I'll give you a specific example. StevenDouglas provided us with an accounts payable manager on an interim basis who, she brought with her more than just accounts payable management experience. She had accounting background. She had, change leadership background, things that you're not necessarily going to always find when you're trying to hire a full-time accounts payable manager. So we were able to benefit from the process improvement and the change. It wasn't just keep doing what we're doing. It was, how are we going to make this better? And how are we going to integrate it better within the finance and accounting function and make it easier for the GL accountants and the accounting managers to do their jobs? Because she had a much more macro level view of the department. And, we are now transitioning from Alexandra to a full-time accounts payable manager, and we're going to lose some of that, that benefit, but it's already now kind of built into the fabric of what we do. So therefore we're able to use that temporary period to build a better department, and then have someone be the kind of someone that will kind of maintain and move forward with what was already built. So
Great example.
That's the benefit.
Great example. Haresh, thoughts?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, Jeff's got some great examples, right? That's really special what he's been able to do there in terms of looking at cost. And every CFO, that's what we drive, right? Drive costs out of the business while delivering value. So I think those were some really great examples. I think one thing, maybe just as an add-on to what we were saying, is one of the other key benefits is there are projects There are different things you do. There are initiatives where you don't necessarily need to have a full-time person, right? It's not an FTE that you're going to put in and you're going to fund, but there's a specific initiative project that you want to do. And I think with the interim skills, having the talent, you can pick and choose. Again, Jeff's example is great, right? You had a manager with broader experience. So that interim position can bring skill set where I could have a 3-6 month project that I don't want to put a full-time person in for, brings that horsepower in, and then establishes processes that can benefit the organization. So I think that's another good way to leverage that piece of it.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. And Haresh, actually, Craig, let's ask you this question. So what's your forecast for the interim market over the next 12 to 18 months in light of the current macroeconomic situation?
Yeah, great question, Matt. As you know, predicting the future is always tricky, but I definitely have some thoughts on where we're heading. But I'll look back for a second. Post-COVID, our industry had record levels of business based on just kind of the recovery from what happened during COVID and all the built up, pent up demand, and the need to accelerate projects that had stalled. And then there was a big rush to lock in the talent that people thought they needed for expected future needs. The past 2 years have been a little bit different, a little more challenging. If you look at the public reporting companies in our industry, many of them have been trending down, double digits in some case, and some as much as 20%. Economic uncertainty has also been a factor, and that often leads to C-suites taking a very cautious approach related to investing in growth initiatives. And I don't necessarily see another spike like what we had in 2022, but I'm certainly bullish for many of the reasons I mentioned earlier about kind of the trends in the space. I think inflation, interest rates, the election, all those things will have some bearing on companies' willingness to invest. And that's really those investments are a major driver of demand in our industry. We've been outperforming the industry as a whole, which is allowing us to invest ahead of that recovery. So we're actually hiring while some of our other competitors are reducing staff. And actually just last week, I had 2 people in my network reach out from competitors where their positions were eliminated. But I expect increased demand over the next 3 to 5 years as the labor market kind of reaches what I'll call an equilibrium point. We're still kind of dealing with some of the tailwinds of the COVID recovery, if you will. But I think the needs of employees, as I mentioned earlier, it's going to continue to evolve. The interim market is well positioned to meet those needs. We'll get more talent, and I believe the share of people engaged to do work through the interim model will actually increase. And I think one interesting thing that I've noticed here in the last few years, more high-level roles are going through this route. So interim CFOs, especially in the PE space, many people tend to think of interim as just tactical delivery-oriented roles, and that's a big part of it. But it's also changing. So I think we'll see some developments there. And I'll check back with you in 18 months and see how good my forecast is, Matt.
Yeah, without a doubt. Yeah, and I imagine you mentioned private equity. When you think about if interest rates start coming down, which we all hope and expect that they will here soon, there's $2.5 trillion of dry powder sitting in private equity coffers right now, ready to be deployed, right? And so, when that money starts hitting the market and companies are changing hands, the amount of change that's going to need to be managed in those newly acquired portfolio companies is going to drive a ton of demand for interim CFOs and interim controllers and interim heads of FP&A, sometimes interim HR leadership in different areas. So I definitely see that macro trend. That I remember when that crossed over $1 trillion and having conversations with folks saying, "Did you ever think there'd be $1 trillion in private equity dry powder?" And now it's 2.5 times that because of just the holdups in the market and the high interest rates and just people's hesitancy to act and sell their businesses, et cetera. So it'll be really interesting to see how this all plays out. It's going to be I think there's going to be a rush for talent here for sure. Haresh, while some business leaders think about interim resources simply as a way to manage variable workloads while keeping costs in line, many companies have actually used outside support to bring in outside perspectives and challenge some of the internal viewpoints. Have you seen these types of benefits in your organization, prior organizations, or this one?
Yeah, I think we have for sure. You bring in a skill set again. You'll have incumbents, and especially in prior companies, we've had folks who had been there 10 years, dozen years, and they do things. They're talented people, but that's what they've seen. That's what they know, right? So you bring in a resource that whether we're refining a process or looking at how to do things better, they bring that mindset. They bring the skill set. You know what you know, and you don't know what you don't know, right? So it's really what can we learn from this? What best practices can we leverage? So I think we've definitely leveraged that in the past. And in light of maybe even Matt, the question we talked about earlier, where do we go, right? As where data is going, where technology is going, we're going to need this mindset. There's only so much every company can invest in its team. If you ask every CFO, every finance team, our team is fully loaded. We all run lean, right? So how do we improve that skill set? And there's a great way to bring in that interim person who has that skill set and train the trainer, right? Set up processes, train our team members on that, especially so that we're, call it future proof and we're moving with what we need to do. I think probably the final point, and as it relates to us, we're in a small market, right? We're in a smaller market, so skill sets, and especially when we're in a pinch or have a project, it's hard to get that immediately in a smaller market. You'll find it takes time, but that interim can bring that in and help us through these projects. So we're not losing time while we're looking for the right person. So it's especially important when, I call it limited resources in a smaller market.
For sure, for sure. Any comments there, Jeff?
Yeah, look, I agree. Not only do I have issues sometimes identifying talent and bringing them in because of market issues, but because of the company's perceived lack of stability, right? We are, we have lenders as owners, and this was a new situation, and there was still some uncertainty around where the company's future was headed, and so it's oftentimes difficult to recruit a full-time person for a position like that. And interim resources was kind of a lifesaver when it came to being able to fill positions that you were struggling to fill, because it was not always easy to convince people that the company was heading in the right direction and we were going to be fine, and this is worth your you leaving your current position to come to a new position. So that certainly helped. And then what I've come to embrace really is and Haresh certainly, that was a lot of what he was saying was, you're getting it's almost like I'm going to take a shot and see if this person can do something different for the organization that we don't currently have. And because it's on an interim basis, it's it's a low risk reward trade-off where I'm willing to take that risk, bring in an interim resource, pay for that service, try and kind of extract as much value as possible, and then move on. And it's worth doing that to see if if the reward is there, as opposed to trying to find a consulting firm to come in and do a long-term engagement or things like that. It's almost like you have this middle road position between a consultant and a full-time employee that I feel like is a bit more flexible, and you have a little bit more agility, and you get similar value than you would from a consultant.
Yeah, and to your point before, it seems like that if the right person comes in and helps you set up the right process, the right policies, better structure, you actually could probably save money on the new hire, because you won't have to hire somebody as heavy, because they can come in and run forward what's already being done versus having to try to create it. And so sometimes you don't need as heavy a resource to be tactical doing the job once it's already been improved by a heavier person, right? So that's one way to extract value as well. Staying with Jeff, so what challenges have you faced when integrating interim professionals into your finance team? And what are the keys to your this recent situation was different because most of them were interim. I know you've used folks at prior companies as well, but what are some keys to success on kind of bringing those folks in?
Sure. Look, even in this current situation, you're going from consultants to interim talent. There was definite fatigue in the company in terms of, hey, we've had these consultants here for, almost a year. I haven't seen an improvement in revenue cycle management. I haven't seen an improvement in accounts payable. I'm still getting phone calls from our vendors asking why we haven't been paid. So then to transition from that to interim talent, the challenge was trying to convince the rest of the organization that these people are here to do their job. They're going to be here on a daily basis. They're not some consultant that is flying in and, charging us an arm and a leg and then leaves. These are people that are, they have a vested interest in the success of the company. They're really no different than a full-time employee. They're just, they have an interim tag. But so from a cultural fit standpoint, trying to say like, this person is doing the job of a full-time employee, and you should treat them as such, and you view them as that type of resource. And that was always a challenge, like, oh, here comes another consultant, or here comes another person that'll be gone in a month's time. And so just getting people over that hump so that they knew that just because, and in fact, I started removing the interim tag from their, they have an email, a company email. They don't have an interim tag in front of their title. As far as you're concerned, this person, works for the company, and therefore you should be able to trust and rely on them. And so that was a definite challenge, because again, it came from a place of, distrust and fatigue, because they didn't, there had been so much turnover, and so that was my biggest challenge.
Yeah, it's the insourcing versus outsourcing model, right? Where they look and feel like your internal employee for as long as they're working for you. They show up to work there every single day like they're an employee of your company under your direction, right? They don't have other clients. So they're not distracted by getting pulled into other engagements that they're sort of still in or haven't finished, or maybe, they actually have one client, right? So they work for you every day. And I think that's one of the big benefits of them not being distracted with multiple clients pulling them in different directions and that sort of thing. Haresh, some comments on that?
Yeah, I think Jeff mentioned about culture, so I won't spend much time on that, but it's key. They're new to the organization, making sure as a manager or their supervisor, helping them to integrate. They don't know the unwritten rules, right? How to operate in that culture. So making sure we're communicating with them, meeting regularly, because this is all new to them. So how do we ensure their success by making sure they understand the culture, the way the company works, and how to just navigate within there. So I think it's really the timely communication, the periodic check-ins or regular check-ins, and just ensuring, right, how to help remove roadblocks or obstacles so that they can continue to be successful. Maybe one thing, maybe very tactical, and I've learned from my past life, is making sure when they're there, there's a laptop for them. There is system access to them, right? Nothing drives me more batty than having a person show up and, okay, well, it's going to take 2 days for a laptop. Come on, guys, right? We've got a resource here that's ready to help, that's ready to drive, and then we don't have either equipment or network access or logins. So one of the things, the lessons learned for me over the years is all that's done in advance. If we know what role they're playing, hey, go set up the same system access that this person has that was doing that role. So it's maybe very tactical, but you can lose days in that process, and that's a lot of time and cost. That in my view, that's wasted. So I think that's critical. And then I think I mentioned it earlier. What is the ultimate success here? It's not only accomplishing the goals and doing that, but once you do transition that, whether it's to a new person coming in or to existing team members, ensuring that that person's there for that successful onboarding. You don't end the interim and on the same day a new person starts. That's probably a good way to fail at that, right? Versus, hey, let's
100%.
ensure there's the adequate overlap, that the training, that handover, that's critical to be successful going forward.
I
Yeah,
agree.
that is definitely
That's
something we go ahead, Jeff.
I was just gonna say that's probably the most valid point of all this for in terms of success is to make sure that you provide that overlap. Because it's
Yeah,
critical.
we usually recommend it right at the beginning of the project is to just make sure that you're planning for some overlap at the end so we can bring that new person in and transition what they're doing and what they've learned and what they've improved and make sure that knowledge doesn't leave the organization when the person leaves the organization, right? I mean, that's really the key. So Craig, let me ask you one last question here. What advice would you give executives looking to leverage interim resources?
Yeah, so the advice you just heard from Haresh and Jeff would be at the top of the list. All good points, and once people have made the decision to use interim resources, that's exactly what they should be thinking about. But kind of stepping back to maybe when you're even considering it, and I think there is an obligation if you're an executive to consider every option you have available to you. You owe that to your stakeholders, and most executives do that. So I think, when you consider how might I use interim resources, or when should I use them, or where should I use them, it's kind of 4 areas for me. Specialized talent that you don't need long term. Kind of gives you flexibility if you can bring it in on a spot basis, use it for when you need it, where you need it, and then move on. You don't need it anymore. Managing peak workloads. Staff your team to manage the day-to-day. And then when you have those peak busy periods like year end, or maybe you have an acquisition that you have to integrate, so there's some extra activities related to that, bulk up your team, use some interim resources for that. Short-term projects, you just got to get them done. There's deadlines. You don't want to put too much on your team and wear them out. So leverage interim for that. And then the obvious one is just, hey, I wasn't expecting to have a gap on my team. Somebody had a medical leave, somebody resigned, and I need to fill that gap. You heard Jeff and Haresh both talk about those situations. And then kind of building on something Haresh said a minute ago, once you have interim support, be very clear about your expectations and expect the same from both the resources and the provider that you're using. And feedback and communication is critical, and doing it timely is critical. In our business, the best talent moves very quickly. So when you're considering options, you really have to be decisive, or you're going to miss out on those A players. And that's probably the best advice I could give you if you're considering interim options into your organization, on top of everything that Jeff and Haresh just shared.
Got it. Excellent. So we're bumping up against 45 minutes here in a minute or two. I don't see any questions yet in the chat. Walker, hopefully I'm looking in the right place for that. I do have an additional question I'm going to ask you guys here while I'm waiting to see if some questions get pushed through. So I'll go with Haresh on this. As you think about major initiatives in your organization, how do you balance the use of internal employees versus deliverable-based consultants and interim professionals to get the outcomes you need while also managing costs, right? How do you kind of thread the needle and balance all, because there are times for each of those, right? And so how do you balance all that?
Yeah, I think it's, again, maybe just taking a step back, what Jeff talked about earlier was absolutely the right way, what he did when he came in, right? So Jeff, you took advantage of probably what was misplaced in terms of a cost structure and the things there. So I would look at it, from a delivery base, it's a major strategic project across the organization that needs the horsepower of a delivery base that is very specific to, this is a priority for the organization. It's going to be cross-functional. It's not only finance. So that's how I would think about that. There is, as Jeff talked about, there is a good cost to that, right? So to me, that's what their specialty is. That's what they do well. They're good at that strategic piece of it. And then when I look at all the things that we just talked about, Craig laid out, do we have a specific project? Do we have a position gap? Do we have a process that we want to close in? Not only, it doesn't have to only be finance, it can be cross-functional as well, but that's where you can do it. You can bring them in right away. They're focused on the project. Matt, you talked about that. I'm not worried about them having to worry about other projects. They're dedicated to this. So it's really in those instances, and it is a more cost-efficient way to do it, right? So again, Jeff eloquently talked about that earlier. So it's really, how do we continue to make sure those projects that we want to implement quickly, that we have the skill sets there? That's how I look at interim. And then if it is an ongoing initiative, and it's something if maybe potentially started as we think this is a project, and you bring the interim person in and goes, and then you do require full-time, or this is something longer or has more bandwidth or more benefits that you can see the project extending, that's when you can start saying back to that, hey, is there value now in us as an organization making this a full-time position? And then we do that transition, that handoff, and that knowledge transfer.
That's great. Thank you. Jeff, comments there?
No, look, I agree with what Haresh said. There's a time and place for each of the consultant versus interim resource versus a full-time employee, and it's being able to identify the needs of the company and which of those resources makes the most sense, because obviously they each come with a different cost, and so it's not to be too much of a finance nerd, but everything's got to have a return on the investment, and so you're looking at maximizing the ROI on the decision you're making. So really, I agree with Haresh that when it's an organization-wide strategic plan or initiative, then there's resources that make the most sense for that, and because you're looking for a specific outcome. And then when it comes to opportunities to make improvements or fill gaps, then you're looking at some type of interim resource. And then obviously ultimately you want to have, ideally you have full-time people managing your day-to-day, because that's going to be your least expensive, but when you do get to that point, you want to know that your processes are kind of optimized, and so you've already gone through that work. You've done the work with the appropriate resources to get to the point where you have your full-time people doing their best work.
Excellent. Thank you. And we do have a question or two from the audience right now. I'm going to point the first one to Craig here, seems most appropriate. This person wanted to ask about the quality of interim talent versus permanent, what the drivers or motivation of someone working as an interim versus a permanent opportunity. Like, what would cause somebody to choose that route?
Yeah, great question. And I talked a little bit about this earlier in terms of the motivation for people to get into the space. They're looking for that flexibility, that variety. Again, COVID, I think, really caused people to sit back and think about the employment model that they're in, and whether it's working for them and in their stage of life and what they're looking for out of their career. So I think balancing that need for flexibility, the need for variety, the desire to see different situations, different companies, different industries, while continuing to grow their skills and making an impact, and kind of balancing that with job security and other factors that everybody worries about. One thing, I get this question a lot from clients and from just people I'm talking to in my network about, well, why would people want to work in interim? And I tell them what I just told you, but probably one of the biggest factors is they love doing the work. So maybe they were a controller earlier in their career in a corporate role. They love being a controller. They love the work of that. They don't love having a team and doing performance reviews, managing people in and out of the organization, hiring, all of that stuff. they just don't love that, but they love the work. So in an interim situation, they can come in, they don't have that burden, if you will, but they can get the work done, contribute to the organization. They know they're there for a defined period of time, and then they move on to their next role.
Yeah, no, that's a really good points. A couple more questions. I actually think this is going to direct to you again, Craig.
Yep.
So is there ever a case where an interim executive becomes a permanent part of the leadership team? I definitely know the answer to that one. And then secondarily, they're asking here, isn't an interim person a higher risk of bailing with no notice? Maybe it'd be key for them to understand our interim model, how they're actually employees of our firm. Many of them have been with us 5, 10, 15 years of full benefits, 401k match, paid time off,
Yeah.
holiday, all that sort of stuff versus a temp, which is what they're probably thinking about, right? So maybe answer both of those for us.
Yeah, no, great point. You kind of answered the second one there. We hire our people. They are looking to do interim work as their career choice for all the reasons I just mentioned a second ago. And so they identify with us, they're affiliated with us, they're W-2 employees, they have their benefits through us. So they're committed, and we talk about that with both them and our clients before we start an engagement. If it's a 6-month engagement, hey, we need you to commit to the 6 months, and generally that happens. That's very different comparing that to a lower level staffing firm where people are just shuffling in and out, and there's not the consistency. And then kind of to the first question about becoming part of the leadership team, that definitely happens. We don't usually go into it looking for that to happen, but if there's a scenario where someone has gone in on an interim basis, they've made a great impact, they become a part of the team, kind of to Jeff's point I think he made, where it's like, don't put an interim tag on them. They're just part of the team trying to get the job done. And hey, if there's a situation where client wants to bring them on board in a different situation and the person is interested in it, then we try to figure out how to make everybody happy in that situation. But that's not really how we enter into interim engagements. But the short answer is yes, that does happen.
And if I can add here, I think, very specifically, that's the exact example we had here, or circumstance we had here. One of my direct reports left during, the Great Resignation for another opportunity. We needed somebody to come in, brought him in as an interim. I think they were about 5, 6 months, and then hired them permanently, right? With the commitment that, hey, if the person is going to look to somewhere else, we need some notification, some time, and some handoff so that our organization is not disrupted. So that circumstance where we brought somebody in interim as a direct report of mine, and then we're able to make sure it worked, it was a good fit, then transition and hire them at full time was a very relevant example for us in the last 6 months to a year.
Yeah, great point.
Yeah, I think Jeff could probably make the same comment. I think he's definitely wound up hiring some folks at different times. So I'm going to actually ask Haresh and Jeff this last question, and obviously Craig, you might have some good advice here, but how would you advise a client or a hiring manager to interview an interim person? It's funny, people they've been interviewing to hire people onto their team permanently for years, and they have certain questions they probably ask and that sort of thing. How's it different? Like, what should they ask differently? How should they interview them? Or is it the same in your opinion? Like, how would you guys advise somebody who hasn't done this
Yep. Jeff, you want to go first?
Sure. For me, it's very simple. I really don't treat them any differently than I would hiring a full-time employee. I want to make sure, again, maybe I may give more credence to their skill set because I feel like they've already been somewhat vetted by, the firm that I'm trusting to provide me with quality resources. So, but I'm still looking at the resume and making sure that they have this necessary skills and experience that I'm looking for. And then I'm very much looking to make sure that from a cultural fit, is this someone that's going to get along with their team members? Are they going to fit into the company, the organizational culture? Are they going to thrive, in the environment that we're going to put them in? So no real difference than I would with a full-time person.
Yeah, I would say from my perspective, the one thing I would look for in an interim, I would probably push a little bit harder is that change management, the sense of urgency, right? Because it is by definition, it's an interim role until we get that. As we hire FTE, they've got you of course you want them to have an impact and a sustaining impact right away from your full-time employee, but they've got a longer ramp, call it, to onboard, to do these things. The interim, we need to make sure that we don't have the luxury of them spending a month getting up to speed. It's how quickly can you come in? The skill sets are absolutely right. They're foundational, right? So I'm presuming whoever we're interviewing is already going to have that skill set. But how quickly can you come in and make an impact? It's with that sense of urgency because we don't have that luxury of time.
Yeah, that's a really great point. And Craig, I don't know if you wanted to add anything there because I think this is our last question, but any closing thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I think they covered it well. You're obviously every situation, it seems like, where you're bringing an interim person in is a little bit different. So there's going to be some nuance, but I don't have a whole lot to add beyond what Jeff and Haresh said. So.
Got it. Got it. Well, I want to, unless anybody has further questions, I just want to, thank the panelists, Haresh and Jeff. Thank you guys. I know you're both incredibly busy. You're both traveling this week when you had no intention of traveling. It wasn't in your weekly plan. And so jumping through hoops to do this for us, we really, really appreciate it. And we always love the partnership with you guys. Craig, obviously, great job. Thank you for your thoughts and wisdom there. And then I want to thank Walker and the team at Hunt Scanlon for giving us the platform to do this. Hopefully you all found this very useful. And I'm just going to check one last. I think we got all the questions. Okay, so thank you, everybody. I hope everybody has a productive week.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Thanks.
Good afternoon.